Everyone, thanks so much for joining me today for our webinar on media and PR for small business. My name's Kristy Bailey. I am a presenter and also an advisor for Business Station as part of the Commonwealth Digital Solutions Program. I also have had my own marketing business in the past, so everything that we're going to go through today is based on real life experience and based on things that I've implemented on a day-to-day basis. So hopefully you get something out of that. The webinar is designed to be as interactive as you'd like it to be, so please use the Q&A functionality or even the chat functionality to ask me questions at any time, and I'll endeavour to answer them. We'll also have a little bit of time at the end of the webinar where you can ask some questions as well. So first of all, to get into it, what we're going to go into or what we're going to go through today, we are going to talk about the importance of PR for small businesses. We'll define media and PR as two individual terms and just discuss how they differ and what they are. We'll talk about building media relations, generating publicity, working with influencers, which is a hot topic. You may or may not have had experience in that realm. We'll talk about the customer journey itself as well, and then look at social media and your PR strategy and what you guys are doing. All right, so to kick it off, media. What is media? Well, essentially media is the means of mass communication, I should say. It's information that's delivered to the public through newspapers, through television, through radio, and a range of different ways online. When you think of the term media, you tend to think traditional media or news outlets, but it's really not the case anymore. Media really is a lot more, and there's an unbelievable number of media outlets that each individual will experience on a daily basis. So think about the kind of things and the kind of media that you come across each day. There's social media, there's YouTube, there's Instagram, YouTube influencers, there's bloggers, there's online publications, there's podcasts, there's so many different things that you can harness to help publicize your business. In a traditional sense, journalists and reporters are the people who write or present the news and also feature stories, and editors tend to control the final content. But what we do know about media these days is that editors don't control the final content. Everyone really controls the content. So that's where there's been a big change. And there's four elements to media and PR, and that's what you see on the screen. This is the Peso model. Peso is a media model strategy, essentially. So Peso stands for paid, earned, shared, and owned media, as you can see in each of those circles there. And it's really important to understand what you're doing in PR or in media or even in marketing, and where that fits into this particular model. You really have to use a variety of different strategies across different mediums. So in the past, paid media was the primary focus of advertising, and then earned media was the primary focus of PR. Shared and owned media wasn't really anyone's focus, but today, because there is so much crossover in each element, as you can see highlighted here on this model, every element has to be a focal point for each business, and you have to be doing something in every element as well. So we'll just go through each of them in a little bit more detail. Paid media is essentially your advertising. It could just be straight out advertising. It could be advertorials, where there's an ad that sits alongside editorial. It could be sponsorships or sponsored content, which is content you pay for, essentially. It could be your traditional stuff like radio, TV, print, or any paid activities. So paid media obviously also includes anything paid online. So your pay-per-click stuff through the Google AdWords network, social media advertising for Facebook or Instagram, sponsored posts, it could be banner ads, anything that there's a financial transaction associated with. The next area that we'll cover is earned, which is earned media, your news coverage, essentially. This is when you've earned the opportunity, often through excellent media relations, to appear in a news story. So media will be in the specific publication as some kind of press coverage, but generally there is an online component that includes backlinks, reviews, and that kind of thing. So even though it is news coverage, there's generally an SEO factor as well. So because of the association with viral content, that earned media space has the potential to reach a huge number of consumers than paid or owned media. And it's a lot more believed. as is shared. So your shared media space is your social media space. So this is user-generated content or social media. It's not created by you as such. It's created by your people or the public, and it really does constantly evolve. So what happens here is largely a result of your marketing, of course, and how well you're marketing and promoting your products, but also your customer service. So you can't afford any negative relationships or relations with your customers at any stage of their purchase cycle, or even they're in the lead up to the purchase cycle, because it tends to come out in this shared media space. So social media is a major element of PR. That last element there is your own assets. So your website, for example, or any owned media. So content that you've created and you have full control over. So like I said, your website, it could be your blog, it could be, you could have ebooks or white papers or other presentations or anything like that. So essentially you fully control the content and its distribution. So if you can add to it, if you can edit it, if you can delete it, then chances are you own it. So each of these 4 categories is a lot more effective when it's used in conjunction with the other categories than it is in isolation. So we will refer back to this Peso model. It's really important to keep it in mind and to make sure that you're doing everything that you can in each aspect of this model to get full reach. All right, so now we're going to define a couple of terms. First of all, PR. What is PR? Public relations essentially is a strategic communication process that builds mutually beneficial relationships between organisations such as yours and the public. So in simple terms, PR, I believe, is having a really good strategy and being able to storytell. So as a small business, and many small businesses don't think that they're actually in the business or in need of PR, but you absolutely are. If you think back to that model, and this is your earned and your shared component. So thinking about that, that's 2 major components of that, that media model. Public relations is absolutely crucial to the success of your business, no matter how big or small it is. So the big difference here is that a small business that tends to be more budget conscious, you doesn't have the luxury of hiring a PR business to do their PR for them. So you do have to take a more DIY approach and really master your own public relations. And that's why you've joined the webinar today. So hopefully we can give you some of that knowledge and some of those tools to be able to confidently do that. Okay, so looking at a bit of a comparison of how media has evolved, and this kind of fleshes out those 4 sections of the model. Now, in the past, if you looked at media, brands controlled the message. Essentially, if I was a business and I had something I wanted to communicate, I would speak to a publicist who was a bit of a spin doctor. They would get a great story out there. They would have fabulous media relations that would then allow full reach. So whatever my story was and whatever the spin was on that, that would get out to the general public. And as the public, consumers were just passive receptors. We had a look at what the information was and we believed it because it was written by a journalist. Now it's very, very different. Everyone really owns the message. So customers are more empowered than they have ever been. There's a lot of simultaneous communications, and traditional media are really just one outlet for customers and probably not even the most popular outlet. So keep that in mind. Generating positive media coverage or publicity is a core function of a public relations person, but it's just one of many core functions. So the title publicist isn't really that relevant anymore. That doesn't talk about the research and the strategy and the messaging behind everything that you're doing and all of the other activities that go into a successful public relations program. So publicist is a bit of a word that was used in the past, and a publicist produced a specific result, like a transactional sort of result, an article or coverage, something like that. Whereas now, as a PR person, you really have to build relationships that give you positive results across all forms of media and across all sections of that model, that Peso model. So hopefully that makes sense. But the key message here really is that consumers are empowered more than ever before. So you have to really be able to engage them to help tell your story. But in terms of helping, another way to help tell that story, obviously publicity is a great way, but to be able to get and generate good publicity, you really have to build relationships with the media. And as I said, as a small business, you don't generally have a PR person that already has those media relations. So your job is essentially to work on a strategy for building those relationships. It's really important for your business because journalists really enjoy dealing with people that can assist them in their work or make their job easier. Now, the media is so fast-paced in this sort of day and age that they don't have the time to research stories for themselves. So if you can deliver them a story on a platter, provide them with something easy, that's interesting, that's got to work for their audience, then it's a massive win for them. Obviously, an exclusive story is even better. But depending on the nature of your business, you may or may not have things that are unfolding that are exclusive enough for a journalist to want to pick them up. But there's generally a lot going on in a business that is newsworthy, as long as you find the right publication with the right audience. So it is really important to understand the difference between news and feature journalists as well. So keeping that in mind. There is also consumer journalists and trade journalists. So you have to think about when you're looking at contacting someone or developing a relationship with a journalist, think about who their publication is speaking to. Is it speaking to trade partners or is it speaking to the end customer? Because these people, these journalists will always be looking for stories that appeal to their specific audience. So if you're pitching something to them that's not going to be relevant to their audience just purely because of the way you've written it, then it might not get that coverage that you want. So a news editor is going to look for straightforward news stories, so new information about something that has or potentially something that will happen in the future, whereas a features editor will be more interested in an in-depth story that is quite topic specific. Consumer media will look for stories that appeal to the public, and trade media will be interested in material that's of interest to the industry or the trade that they're talking to. So you really have to have that basic understanding first. And then to build good media relations, you really have to have a good news sense, know what information each outlet presents and what type of items might be of interest to them. So determine who their audience is. So that could be readers, it could be listeners. Look at their past material and determine what they like to write about. So it could be articles, it could be other things that they've published. Also have a look at lead times. Lead times are really important, and knowing the lead times and deadlines for the media that you're targeting is absolutely crucial. So for example, news items for print, say, and even radio or television have a lot shorter lead time because they can appear very quickly. While feature articles, if, let's say, even if you go back to traditional news like your state-run newspaper, they still might have feature articles, but they'd be planning them well in advance so that the journalist that's writing the feature can spend the time to gather the relevant content. So it could be months of lead time in that sense. So knowing the lead times of the specific publication or the specific, I shouldn't say publication, the media outlet that you're targeting is really, really important. Knowing specific people is then that next level. So getting the names of journalists and their contact details, finding out how they like to receive their information, and making sure that you've got the up-to-date details of people in relevant organisations as well. Now, I quite often get asked, how can you do that? How can you get to these specific people? I think research here is a key thing to do. Now, you could be researching via LinkedIn. It could be by being a consumer of that publication yourself. So let's say it's a magazine, by reading that magazine and having a look at who's writing the relevant articles. If it's online, you could be following blogs and engaging with whoever's writing them as well. So really do your research and spend time. Now that helps you develop a news sense. So if you go back to that first point of developing a news sense, actually spending the time and investing the time in becoming an audience or one of the members of the audience of the specific publication or media outlet that you're targeting, it will really help with all of these things. Accuracy is really important, making sure that you are providing information that is obviously 100% accurate, but also on time. So not providing late information or anything like that. Every media outlet wants to be the first to publish info. So keep that in mind. If you do, we'll talk a little bit about writing a media release in a second, which is a great way to get your information out to the media. But if you end up being the contact person on that media release, you have to be really responsive. So being accurate and on time, and in terms of responding, is equally as important as producing information that's accurate and on time. I would also really look at inviting the media. Once you've developed this database and you really know who it is that you're targeting, don't hesitate to invite them to see or to experience your product or service if and when that's appropriate. So an invitation really can't hurt, particularly if you've got something coming up that is sort of event or time-based. Absolutely consider that. But even if it's just, a broad visit, come and experience this, something that's new, different, or, just to experience your product or service for themselves, I think is a really good idea as well. Getting to know local media is another one. So local media often gets forgotten when we're looking at generating PR and building media relations. We think big, you think newspapers, television, radio, that kind of thing. But look at the little guys as well. Look at the local papers that you've got in your area, and make an effort to get to know who's writing for those, more localized media outlets. They will always have online avenues as well. So if it's print that you're targeting, have a look at what they're producing online as well. Obviously make regular contact once you've got this database. So keep in touch with them. Once you've established a relationship, make sure that you nurture it. Don't do that too often as to annoy anybody, because everyone's busy, obviously time poor. So keep that in mind. But yeah, regular contact I think is really important. Now, keep in mind what we're talking about here with building media relations is for the purpose of generating publicity at some point. The building of media relations takes a long time, and the publicity might just be a one-off when you have a specific event. So make sure that you do allow plenty of time to do these things that I've mentioned here. Now, publicity is just a tactic. As I mentioned, public relations is, it's a whole approach of all areas of that media model that I showed you, and it does require a planned strategy and takes time. So absolutely keep that in mind, but building media relations is a great starting point. Now, then we go on to generating publicity as a result of those media relations. So this is, again, looking at that earned space. Publicity is all about spreading the word about your business through non-advertising channels. So earning the right to appear in those media outlets, and that could be online or offline. So like I said, you've got those good media relations. If you've spent the time to really, you're invested the time in the media relations side of things, you'll know who the media are. You'll know, you'll be developing or having maintained a good relationship with them, but you still need to keep in mind that they're going to want newsworthy stories that are timely, so on time or ahead of time, that is something different or unique, that generally have some kind of human interest element or provide some kind of eye-catching or emotive sort of visuals or something like that. So something that they can report on that will really perk the attention of their audience, whether they're readers, viewers, listeners. So that's really, really important to keep in mind. Once you've got to identify what that is, you can communicate with the media a number of ways. A media release is generally the most common. You could produce a newsletter that goes out to a media database as well as your consumers, but again, it's not direct and it's not directly speaking to media. So this might be something that you do already and it goes out to your customers, which is fine. Maybe add your media list to that database so that they get it as well. In both cases, you'll have to use either photos, images, or videos, something that adds to the content that you're speaking about. There has to be some visual element as well. You can distribute yourself, or you can use online news centers to distribute your stories, depending on, again, budget, how much do you want to pay. And of course, you can use social media. So making sure that you share, tag, and use relevant hashtags that media outlets that you're targeting are using as well, so that they can pick up on the content that way. Going back to what we were just discussing in terms of having building those media relationships and having a news sense, as part of that research, you will look at the social media channels, you look at their online, their offline, absolutely everything. So building a really solid profile on them, which will give you things like their tags, their hashtags, so that you can engage with them in a social space as well. All right, so now we're going to talk about writing a media release. Now, as I mentioned, this is the most common way to generate publicity, and it's the most, I guess, traditional way in terms of journalists receiving information. So a media release is pretty straightforward. It is a document that you'll send out to the media that details anything that could be classified as news. So journalists will take the media release, and if they find it interesting, they might write an article about it. And depending on the journalist and the publication, sometimes they'll publish exactly what they read, and they might fact check later, or they may never fact check. So you might have seen on social media quite a lot that there's a news outlet producing or publishing information, and then the public go on and correct them. Now, that happens because the news world is so fast-paced. They'd rather be first to publish something, even if it's slightly inaccurate, than waste time checking facts and not be seen to be, having the breaking news. So think about your small business. This kind of thing might not be relevant if you're aiming your information at more feature type journalists or industry specific journalism. But when we're talking about fast-paced mass media, this can definitely happen. So if you've got something newsworthy and someone picks up on a media release that you have sent out, the best thing and the purpose behind it is that your business will get promotion as a result, and it will generally be free. Well, it will be free if it's genuinely a journalist has picked up on it. So let's just say that it is a newspaper or a magazine publication. They'll also have a website and social media channels, so you're getting even more reach. Your story will absolutely be covered in more than just print. You may have specific media that you're targeting that are only online, so you're obviously getting that as well. So you'll get that free marketing through the media avenue that publishes your release. Via their website, you'll get links to yours. Your name will be searched, so there'll be increased traffic to your website. SEO-wise, those backlinks will be really valuable, and it'll build your brand. So it is a great way to get credibility within your industry as well. Now, and as I mentioned, SEO. So you have to keep in mind, it is really competitive. You have to make sure that your media release is the one that grabs the attention of journalists, of all the things that are going on. So I find that the best media releases are written in this inverted pyramid sort of format that you see on the screen. Now, you would start with the lead up the top. So that's really the most newsworthy information, the who, what, where, when, why, and it really has to be a hook to draw the media outlet in. Then you've got the body, which is some more important details about, or I guess, establishing the main argument is a key thing. Some evidence to back it up, or quotes. Quotes from an authoritative person are a really good idea. Now, that authoritative person, let's say you're a one-man show, so you own and operate your business. You might be the one writing the media release. You're obviously writing it in third person. You might put yourself in there as a quote to back up the story. So general manager Kristy Bailey says this is the greatest thing to ever happen in the history of this business, for example. So it's still an authoritative person to the story. Third-party quotes, I think, are even more important, or not so much more important, but give a lot more credibility as well. So think about whatever the main argument or the main story is that you're pitching, and what is the reason that this will be interesting, I should say, to the audience of the outlet that you're targeting, and then who is important to them to back this up. Obviously, if you're getting a quote, you have to actually get a quote. So you can't just write that someone said something if they haven't, and you have to get authorization from that person to publish what they've said and credit and quote them. So there are a couple of key things with a quote, but I think a quote is a really crucial part of a media release. Now, the last bit is the tail. That's just the extra information, a bit of background, some details, and a little bit of extra content about your business. So it could be something along the lines of, this business operates training in Perth, in WA, NT in Queensland, been operating for 10 years, etc., etc. So a little bit just to back up on the story, and the contact details, so the media contact details. Now, one thing that's not shown on this particular inverted pyramid that's hugely important is the heading. So the actual headline of your story or of your media release. Now, this is generally about 5 words, but, depending on your business. A big thing that I always see is the subject line. So the subject line of the media release is just as important as the actual heading. So most media releases are emailed out, and we'll talk about distribution in just a second. But when you're writing your headline, think of what's also going to work in an inbox, because that's really going to be the first thing that is the attention grabber, I guess, of the outlet that you're targeting. So that's something really important to keep in mind as well. So going more into the distribution side of things, you've found something interesting to say, you've written an amazing media release. Before all of that, you developed amazing and really solid relationships with the various media outlets that you're hoping to target. Now you've got to get this media release out. So to get good reach, you have to have that excellent database and a relevant database to your story. So let's say you've built up an amazing database, but this story is something quite specific, quite niche. It's about a particular event that's happening. That event might not be relevant to your entire database. So you might have to handpick specific outlets out of that. As a starting point, let's say you had something that was, likely to be picked up by the majority of your database, or you're trying to work out who you can send a media release to. I would start with local newspapers. They always have an online element to them. Local broadcasters, so TV and radio, if that's relevant. Any industry-specific organisations that may have publications. So they might just be doing an email out to, their membership base or something like that. But it'll get you credibility in the relevant industry. Chamber of Commerce, if you're a member of your local Chamber of Commerce, or any other relevant membership organisations that you're a part of. So this could be at a national, it could be a state, or it even could be at a regional level. So thinking about that. Now, you can also get greater distribution through media agencies, and an example of one would be Australian Associated Press. So something to look at. But again, there's a paid element. What we're talking about here is media and PR for small businesses that generally don't have those kind of budgets. So you absolutely can send it out yourself. Make sure that the release is addressed to the right person at whoever the media outlet is. Otherwise, they might never receive it. If you're not sure, mark it for attention of that person's title. So, for example, the food editor, if it's hospitality. Definitely don't hesitate to email it out. That's very widely accepted. Where possible, though, paste the release into the body of the email rather than adding it as an attachment. So if it's in the body of the email, you make it even easier and more sort of eye-catching, I guess, for the outlet that you're targeting. The info is right there, rather than, again, blocking up an inbox, them having to do the work in terms of opening it. An attachment sounds simple, but when you're busy, if the info is right there, it's a lot easier. I would definitely send it with those good quality images that I mentioned. Just be careful if you're sending high-res images. Again, you can block up people's inboxes, or they may even bounce back. So you might consider attaching a lower res image with a reference to contact you for high-res images, or you might insert that as part of the body of the email as well, again with a reference to contact you for high-res images that can be published. Now, other organisations might be able to assist in publicity if they receive your releases as well, like your industry organisations that I mentioned. So keep that in mind. Now, when you are sending media releases, if you're sending it to a long email list, don't forget to use the BCC or the blind carbon copy function. You don't want a long list of journalist names appearing on each other's email recipient list. So it's very bad from a professionalism perspective, and it's poor ethics. So definitely keep that in mind. If you're sending the same release out to multiple outlets, just consider whether or not you would actually benefit from adapting that release slightly. So, you might be sending something to the local newspaper that talks about you being a local business in that particular, shire sort of area. And then if you're sending it to a trade publication, it might be talking about, how long you've been in the trade type thing. So you might have 2 or 3 versions of the same release, and that's absolutely okay as well. And definitely recommended to tailor them to the outlet that you're speaking to. That subject line, as I mentioned, though, that's going to get the interest of whoever you're sending it to. So use the headline of the story as the subject line of the email. And I see this all the time where a company will send out a media release and they'll go, company XYZ media release, and that's their subject line. Now, that's a really missed opportunity. I know I personally look through my emails and sort of delete based on subject lines or read based on subject lines. So that's really what you want to use for a hook to get someone to read your email a little bit more. So that's something really important to consider as well. Okay, so going back to this Peso model, publicity is what we've just been talking about when it comes to media releases and coverage in publications. So that's really majority about the earned media, whereas public relations itself is about all media. But keep in mind what we're talking about with earned goes into the shared space as well. When we talk about publicity, PR itself literally fits in with each element of this Peso model. So it has to be incorporated into your entire marketing strategy. So now we're going to talk about influencers who sit in both the shared and also the paid space, and almost cross over a bit into the earned because it can be perceived that it's earned, so to speak. Now, you may or may not have dealt with influencers or have any experience with influencers in the past, but no doubt you have heard the term social influencers. It's really not anything new. So social influencers have been around in a variety of different forms forever. But today, influencers is largely people who have that significant credibility or a huge reach within a target audience, and it largely revolves around being online and social media. So if you think about influencer marketing, whether or not you've had any experience in it, it is hugely popular and it can be extremely effective as a form of marketing, and it can also be really cost effective. It's a great way to generate that positive PR, but you have to be really careful as well. The reason it works is that influencers really do have a higher power to affect the purchasing decisions of others. And it's generally because of their authority, as in they're known for knowing about a particular topic. It could be their knowledge, it could be their position that they're in, or their relationship with their audience. And it could be in a distinct niche that they actively engage with or, a broader range of, or broader audience, I should say. Now, the size of the following will depend on the size of their topic or their niche as well. In terms of who influencers are, they could be bloggers, they could be social media influencers like Instagrammers or Facebook influencers, they could be YouTubers, podcasters, they could be celebrities or key opinion leaders. So they could be journalists themselves, but have a massive following, and therefore they are an influencer. You might find that there are even academics or professional advisors or just experts in a particular industry as well. So they are essentially people that have an above average influence on their specific audience. Okay, so that's the interesting thing to note. The audience is really the key thing here. Now, in my opinion, social media has devalued this form of PR because there are a number of, how do you say it nicely, fakes perhaps, which isn't a nice way to say it, or wannabe influencers or emerging influencers. So they might not quite have the audience or the reach or, the commitment from their audience yet, but they want it. So they're trying to establish themselves. From the fake perspective, there's sometimes you'll come across people that will tell you they have huge followers. They want something for nothing from you to cover your product or service. But when you look into it, maybe the numbers don't quite stack up, or you're concerned that it's not a true audience and that they've somehow in a dodgy way obtained this audience. So you really do have to be careful. in terms of how you can be careful and how you can really leverage influencers. Well, first of all, I think that it's really important to note that influencer marketing should be directed by you. So you approach them, not the other way around. Now, it does involve leveraging these influencers in your content marketing. So things on your website, your socials, your blogs, as well as what they put on theirs. And it can have huge benefits. And those benefits can include increased traffic. They could be leads and actual customers. So yeah, there's a huge number of benefits. The reason it works is because we tend to trust friends or colleagues or experts more than we trust advertising. So it's not seen to be advertising as such. Although, you know, people are pretty savvy to what's going on online, particularly in social media. So sometimes it is obvious, but marketers who appreciate the fact that it does work and devote time and resources into creating these authentic relationships with the people that matter to their business are going to get the most value out of this. And the influencer does spend time building these authentic relationships with their people as well. So if you can align that influencer, it will work perfectly. So choosing the right influencer is the key here. And it really comes down to audience. So their audience must match yours. Now, there is a key criteria to determine if it's going to work for both of you, both your company and the influencer. Now, first of all, the value to the influencer is really important. So what's in it for them? They're not going to work for free. So it could be dollars. It could be a product, a free product or an experience. There could be a payment or transaction. So you really have to determine that first. And as a small business, go, okay, well, now that I know this is what they want, is that even possible for me? So does that match your capabilities and resources? The audience is hugely important, really looking into, and I've said this a couple of times, but do they match your specific target market? So who is the actual influencer talking to, and how are they interacting with them? And is it the type of people that would buy your product or service? So first of all, you have to really know your own target market. So that's a key thing. Who is the demographic that's going to purchase from you? So what do they look like? What gender are they? What age bracket are they? How do they interact? What social media sites are they even on? You know, let's say your target market is an older demographic that you've really researched and know that they're predominantly on Facebook. And then an influencer approaches you and they are an Instagram influencer. Is that going to work? If your target market's not even on that social media channel, probably not. Well, absolutely not. So the audience demographics, both yours and theirs, are really important in making sure that there's a match. So that would be the very first thing that I would consider. And then obviously how much it's going to cost you, what's in it for them, or what's, you know, what is the transaction going to look like. I would look at the reach, so the size of their audience, but size alone isn't enough. Like, you know, basically they could come through to you and say that they've got 10,000 people that follow, but you look at their posts and you can see that there's no engagement there. So engagement really has to take priority over the reach, but reach is important as well. So it has to be a combination of both. If, you know, let's say an influencer only had 500 people following them, but everyone was really engaged, I mean, that's good, but it's only 500 people. So have a look at the cost. What's the cost going to be to you? And does that work out? So reach and engagement together are really important. Looking at, I guess going into the engagement side of things a little bit more and looking at that, have a look at their past posts. In their posts, have a look at the likes, the comments, and the shares in there. So if there's lots of likes, that's great. More engagement would be their followers commenting or sharing their content, because that's going to get you even more reach. I would be really on the lookout for true or genuine conversation on the posts. So having a look that the influencer really does engage with their audience, because the more engaged the influencer is, the more trust there is with their audience. So the more they're going to believe when the influencer starts talking about your product or service, the more believable their promotion of it is going to be. I would also have a look at the quality of their writing style and their photography, and again, making sure it matches your target segment. And also, have a look at the connection to other influencers. Are they respected? Are they known? Are they actually interacting with other influencers as well? This is an absolutely great form of PR if you can use it right. So it has to be done right. You have to be comfortable to say no to influencers that don't meet this criteria. So their audience demographics might be right, but then their reach and their engagement might be off. So, all of these things have to align to make sure that it's a quality interaction. And of course, the value to the influencer or what's in it for them is going to be one of those key elements as well. So nothing can be looked at in isolation. It has to be looked at as a whole, I should say. So that's really the key thing for influencer marketing. Very good form of PR, and I would highly recommend it if you have the time to do it right. All right, so how else can we generate good PR? Well, our customers are a really key element here. But to get good PR from your customers and valuable PR, you have to engage with them. That's a really key thing. 88% of people are said to be influenced by reviews and online comments. So that's that shared media space. So thinking about that, do you know what people are saying about you online? And are you actually part of that conversation? So if nothing else from today, I would absolutely get you or encourage you to go online, start having a look at Google, have a look at Facebook reviews or anywhere else that people can review you. Now, this might not be on something that you control. So your Google page, people can leave reviews even if you haven't claimed your listing. Facebook, obviously you have to have your Facebook page set up, but have a look at the reviews there and have you been responding to them? But then also look at third-party sites. So there could be anything from Yelp to TripAdvisor. So, have a look at where else people can actually leave comments. So Google your name and see what comes up, or, know your industry enough to know where there are platforms for people to leave reviews. And then make sure that you are part of that conversation so that you are engaging with your customers if they're trying to reach out to you. Positive or negative reviews should be replied to. Keep in mind that social pressure can tarnish your branding as quickly as you grow, and fingertips are always on the move. So this is a key factor of PR. You have to be there to join the conversation when it's positive, when it's negative, and you have to do that right as well. So keep that in mind. People will quickly let their friends know whether or not they've enjoyed something or if they're a bit disgruntled about their service. So it's really important that you're there to offer that support to your customers if they are reaching out online. Now, no business is perfect. So I believe that virtually everyone in any industry will have to deal with customer complaints at some point. So it could be something as simple as getting, they get the wrong drink at a cafe, or there could be a major complaint with a product or service that they've received. So how you handle that makes all the difference. So there are a few reasons that we don't handle complaints well. Generally, and again, as a small business, being too busy is a big thing. So maybe you don't have time to handle the complaint. Maybe the complaint came about as a result because you're a one-man team and it's hard to process the level of orders that you're getting or something along those lines. So being too busy can really impact that customer service experience. But what I see a lot in social with small businesses is being defensive. So businesses and small businesses, we love our business and we truly believe in everything about our business. So being defensive in our responses in terms of, sometimes there are reviews that come online that aren't fair and sometimes they're not warranted. And it is very easy to get online and start being defensive and, basically say that didn't happen, or, this was what really happened, or something along those lines. Even trying too quickly to come up with a solution can be seen as being defensive. So I'll sort the problem out, just go away type scenario. People sort of pick up on that. So that is another reason that complaints aren't perceived to be handled well. If you've got staff, they might be intimidated by a lack of training. So make sure that your staff are all really well trained on complaint handling and that they know their level of empowerment. They know when they can offer a solution to a customer as a result of a complaint. So make sure that those procedures are really in place. Any of those reasons can have a serious impact on your shared media and result in some really negative PR. Now, I've seen this a little bit actually online. In particular, you know, I think hospitality is always really critiqued because a meal might come out and it's such an individual thing, personal taste. So it could be cooked exactly how the chef wanted it to go out, but someone just didn't like it, so they could get on, or it's not what they thought it might be. So you do see this a lot on social, particularly people are able to take photos. The key thing here is to make sure that you are on every channel and that you are really replying to people as these complaints are coming in. Don't let things get out of hand and other customers getting online to answer complaints and I guess negative reviews that other people are leaving for you. So yeah, I've seen that before when something's gone wrong. The company hasn't been there to reply to the review, but other customers have, and then it can really snowball. You see it a lot in the big guys, your Telstra and, you know, those kind of things. You see that a lot. But yeah, as a business, particularly a small business, you have to be there and part of that conversation as well. Now, how you can help bringing positive PR from your customers is a really key thing. Now, there are 3 elements to engaging with your customers on social media. So you have to make sure that you're considering all of these 3 elements. The first one is to listen. So a bit of social monitoring is a really good idea. So listen to mentions of your own brand, listen to what customers are saying about your competitors, listen to what's being said in and around events. Also look at brand and reputation tools that you might be able to use and import that data into your own reporting so you can manage it and monitor it month on month. Google reviews, obviously there's your Facebook reviews, there's TripAdvisor, there's tons of different review sites, but make sure you're listening to all of them and you're maintaining customer service levels online by talking. So talk back to people, talk with pictures, talk with media releases, engage with customers on social media, engage with influencers, blogs, video communities, social networks. Talk to your customers when they're actually with you, and then continue that conversation online. So I think that's a really important. If you talk and people talk back, it gives you obviously the opportunity to listen, but you also have to support people. So direct people to channels where they can talk to you. So in your physical environment, make sure that people have links to your social media, or they know which social media channels you're on. Advertise them, and it doesn't even have to be in your physical environment, but even on your email footers, on your website. Give your social media links so that people know where they can leave feedback, and that makes it a lot easier for you to find that feedback. So keep that in mind as well. So if you can support your customers by directing them to where they can talk, you can then listen because they're going to be talking to you, and then you can talk back. So it becomes a bit of a cycle. And I think all 3 elements are really, really important. Now, even if you're doing everything right and it's all very positive from a PR sense, crisis might strike. Now, I know as a small business, we don't like to think that a crisis will ever strike, but I think having a crisis plan, it only takes a small amount of time to develop a crisis plan, and having one, if and when a crisis does strike, it'll allow you to get through it in the most effective way. So absolutely have a plan before there is any crisis. In that plan, you should identify who the key spokesperson is within your organization. Make sure that that person responds in a very quick manner, is very honest, open, and transparent when talking to any media or even customers. Don't forget to keep your employees and other stakeholders informed of what's going on as well if there is a crisis. So that communication is really key. Communication with your customers and suppliers is also really important. Timing is a really key thing, and I did mention be timely, but update early and often. So updating often is just as important. And don't forget that this could be done by way of media releases. It could be done verbally. It could be done on social media. So keep that in mind. Now, you might be thinking, in my small business, what is going to go wrong? But I think a lot can go wrong, particularly in current times when we've got even things as simple as a COVID outbreak. So I remember, I think it could have been the last shutdown or lockdown that Perth had, which was quite a while ago now, but I think there was a new business involved, a small business, a fitness business, perhaps a gym. And I think that, again, they were small, just getting started. Think of the negative and the crisis of negative PR that would have come as a result of that. Now, something that's completely beyond their control. They could be doing everything right. But did they have a plan? Did they have a person that would speak to the media and say what they were doing and how they were doing it and how they were going to ensure the safety of future customers and really protect their brand in that sense? Did they regularly update as new cases emerged or as people were getting tested? So that's a really relevant example. Some bigger examples that I've been involved in have been accidents and incidences and that kind of thing. So again, it's never a nice situation. Unfortunately, journalists that could have been your best buddy when you were telling them something positive and new and exciting and inviting them to your event or your business to experience your product or service can quickly become on the other side. I'm not going to say your worst enemy, but they can very quickly report negatively about your business if and when a crisis does strike. So keep that in mind. This is all part of building media relations. So let's say you have those really positive media relations in place and a crisis does start. That key point there, second from the bottom, where I've said update early and often, go to the media through your contacts and go, do you want the information? I'll provide you the information, rather than waiting for them to publish information that may not be accurate. And that's the key thing with the media. They hear a story and they might hear bits and pieces. They'll pick up bits on social media and they might be pretty keen to publish it on that basis. Whereas if you've got the real story and the way that you want the story to go out to the public, it could help for you to get in first and go to the media. So hopefully that all makes sense. But I do hope that at some point you develop a crisis plan just in case. Hopefully you never ever have to use it, but it will really help protect your business if and when you do. Okay, so we've just about come to the end of the webinar. I really do hope that it's given you a greater understanding of PR, so the paid, the earned, the shared and the owned elements. And I hope that you're more confident to be able to build your brand across all areas. So some top tips to do that are, first of all, always factor in the Peso model. Don't leave out any components. So go away from today and have a look at what you're actually doing from a PR perspective in each of those 4 components. Now, media releases are important. Craft compelling stories on anything that's new and interesting within your business. Aim for a target of, even just a couple per year. So set yourself a bit of a goal and see if you can stick to that. In the meantime, really develop those media relationships and build up that database. But don't forget, as small businesses, a lot of the time we've got a really interesting story behind our brand. So promote your own expertise. Or the expertise of other individuals in your business. In your owned, your earned and your shared media, make sure that you are talking about this. Make it personal and really tell that story. I think that people love that human factor, which I mentioned way back at the beginning. So the human element is really important. Now, for cheap and pretty effective PR, look at sponsoring or participating in charitable and community events, but make sure they're relevant to your industry, to your business, and make sure that the audience perfectly matches yours. So think about that. I know as small businesses, again, we quite often get approached for sponsorship of various things. It could be the local footy club or it could be something bigger, but make sure that you are really considering who the audience is. So let's say it's a local event and they want a prize or a donation. Think about at that event, who is the audience? Who are the customers? Who are the people going to be at that event? Now, if you can honestly say that those people are matching your target audience and likely to become your customers at some stage in the future, or there's a chance that they would, then it could really represent a good opportunity for you and cost-effective way to market your business. Definitely look out for influencers in your industry. Start following them. Start doing that incidental research now. So as you're developing that news sense, which we spoke about at the beginning, make sure that you're doing so from the influencer perspective as well. Now, the last tip to build your brand and to protect your brand from a PR perspective is to use Google Alerts. So to track what's being said about you online, you can set up Google Alerts in your account. You choose keywords that Google reports on. So once it's set up, you'll get a notification by email anytime those keywords appear online. So make sure the keywords are specific and relevant. Definitely, if you've got a specific brand name, definitely enter that of your competitors or any other keywords, so that you know what's being said about you online in platforms that that maybe you don't have the ability to follow on a daily basis as such. So that's a really good way to just track a bit of online PR. All right, guys, that is it from me. If anyone has any questions, I will most certainly stay online now to answer them. We have just scratched the surface. So if you're wanting to know more, keep in mind that you can, if you haven't already joined this federal government program, it is $44 for a 7-hour package with the program. 3 of those hours are face-to-face one-on-one appointments with an advisor. And the rest are workshops and webinars. So there's a huge value to get there for just $44. So really reasonable price for a small business. And like I said, this is a federal government program, and we are delivering that in WA, NT and Queensland. So get in touch through the Business Station website if you're interested. Please shoot through any questions that you've got via the chat or the